How do you do what you do and maintain any
mental health?
Yeah. Let's just tell everybody you have the YouTube show Soft White Underbelly, which I found a while back and just watched one video and then I went down the rabbit hole. And today I binged a bunch of them preparing for this. And whew, dude, it's so sad and so heartbreaking. And you interview all kinds of people, addicts, prostitutes, Johns, gang members, and why Soft White Underbelly? Why'd you come up with that name?
I remember my dad when I was in the 60s, 70s, talking on the phone with, I heard that term being used to, it's like an analogy for the vulnerable part of whatever you're talking about. I don't hear that term anymore, but I remember it back then. And I always thought it was a cool name. Blue Oyster used it as their original name before Blue Oyster Cult. So it was a fun name. Makes people wonder what the hell it's all about.
Was very appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's fitting for what I'm doing.
Completely. How did you get involved in interviewing all of these people that are sort of downcast from society?
So I've been an advertising photographer since I was 14 years old, or after high school, really. I went to college for it, but I was always into photography. And then I got into advertising, and I did that for decades and decades. Had a great career. And then what happened is, my advertising work was so slick and beautiful and perfect, and everything is retouched, so it's better than life. And you do that for decades, and you get burnt out, and you just get fed up with the perfection and all the aspirational aspects of advertising. And I just wanted something that was real. I recognized that there were things going on in the world that weren't so perfect. And I just felt like my life was out of balance because I didn't want to grow old and have my kids say, what did your dad do? Oh, he shot advertising his whole life. I wanted to do something different. And I've always done these side projects. Even when I was a teenager in Chicago, I was always fascinated with the drunks on Madison Avenue on the west side. You see these guys sleeping on park benches and just with a paper bag and a bottle in their hands. It's like, what? It was such a interesting lifestyle to me because I didn't grow up like that. I grew up, in a pretty perfect household. Mom and dad, parents loved me. It was great. But I was fascinated with all that dark stuff. And that continued throughout my career. I was always doing portraits of people like that. And I didn't really do much with it until about 1999, I started working. While I was doing advertising, I would sneak away whenever I had a hole in my schedule, which wasn't often. But over 9 or 10 years, I went to each of the lower 48 states and started photographing everything that exists in the U.S. Cowboys in Wyoming, drunken Indians in New Mexico, ballerinas in New York City, repo men in Oklahoma, auto mechanics in Alabama, pedophiles all over the country, polygamists in Utah, the Amish in Pennsylvania, just everything that kind of fits for that's Pennsylvania, they have Amish there. So I would pick that and I'd hunt it down and find it. So I got really good at finding these subcultures that we've all heard about, but you didn't really know if, some of them are easy to find. Drug addicts are easy to find, but there's other subcultures that I've found that are more difficult to find and certainly difficult to photograph and now really difficult to interview. So I did that book, came out in 2010. It's called Created Equal, and I was really proud of it. Put my heart and soul into it, but it didn't really I would sit at a table when somebody's looking at it, and they would go, "Oh, what did he sound like? What did the cowboy sound like? How did he get like this? How did he get this career? What was his childhood like?" All these questions, and I honestly didn't know it for each of these 200 portraits in that book. And I realized if I'm going to make this really stick the way I wanted it to, I'm going to have to do it with an interview as a backstory. So it's a portrait, and then I would just do these interviews that might just exist behind the portrait as you're looking at it. And that's how I started. And I always had studios like on Skid Row. While I was doing advertising in LA, at my LA studio, I'd have another studio down on Skid Row, which was cheap, and I would just sneak away there on slow days and just photograph all the drug addicts, the prostitutes, the transgenders, the mental health, the people that are off the rockers, everything, gang members. And I loved doing it, but I never really did anything with that until I started. Canon came out with a Canon 5D, which is a still camera that did video. And I just was playing around. I never shot video in my life, and I'm like, let me just put this thing on a tripod and interview somebody. And there was this girl, Caroline, who was a heroin addict prostitute down on Skid Row. And I got to know her. And I said, "Hey, would you want to just sit and tell me your life story?" And she goes, "Sure, I'll do it." So she sat down and did this. And it was heartbreaking. Jesus, I just hit a grand slam my first time at bat. A really horrifying story. And she, so I did that. And I was like, wow, that was amazing. I started doing a few more. And they were all interesting in their own way. Every single one was different, very different and interesting. I'm like, maybe there's something here. And went through a divorce, went through, my mom, went through a lot of stuff. My mom died, went through a divorce. My advertising industry, advertising industry changed a lot in those years. Like this was like 7, 8 years ago, and I gave up my studio, and I just kind of like didn't know what I was doing with my life. And I had all these storage units for all my studio equipment and my furniture. I was building a house, so I had all my furniture in the house. I had like 4 or 5 different storage units around the city. I'm like, let me just consolidate all these into one big space, and maybe I'll have room for a studio up front, and I'll start doing those portraits and those interviews I was doing on Skid Row before, and just see if I enjoy doing that, because I didn't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I was like, I wasn't doing advertising anymore, and I didn't know what I was. I was just drifting, and I started doing these, and I just loved it, and I started doing them every day, and I've done it pretty much every day for over 3 years now.
What you're doing is almost the exact opposite of advertising.
It's a reaction to that slick, aspirational. Yeah. I shot Apple for 10, 12 years and made these products look amazing, right? They had to be perfect, and I'm like, life isn't perfect. Life is messy. Life can be really messed up. And I longed for that. So that's what this is. And I got all these skills, all these chops of how to interact, how to find these people, how to interact with them, how to find them, how to connect with them, how to get their trust from doing Create Equal, where I did that for 10 years, and I was interacting with all kinds of people, from Hell's Angels down to from pedophiles, everything, you name it, everything that exists in the U.S. I got. When I first started, I was really shy, and this is going to be really hard. I decided this was my project. This is what I'm going to do. But when I first started, it was like, man, this is not my personality type, to go up to strangers and tell them what I want to photograph you. That was so hard. But now I've gotten so good at it that it's a breeze. I got to a point. I remember early on, I was just like so nervous to do this. To walk up to a stranger in a casino in Las Vegas and say, hey, I think you're interesting. I'd like to photograph you. That was the first one I did. And then by the end, I was like, I remember I wanted to photograph the Hells Angels, the motorcycle gang up in Oakland is like their main headquarters. And I just flew up to Oakland. You can't really arrange that. You can't call them up on the phone and say, hey, I'm a photographer in LA. I want to photograph you guys. That's just not going to happen. So I just flew up there, and it was a morning, and I ring their buzzer at their headquarters in Oakland, and no answer. It's like 9:30 in the morning. I ring it again. Nobody answers. I ring it a third time, and somebody comes. Oh, this junkyard dog of a biker opens the door and says, "What the fuck do you want?" And I'm like, I start telling him. He just slams the door in my face. He goes, "Fuck off!" And he slams the door. Like, that didn't go well. But I've done this so much now that I'm so good at it that I knew to give him some time, allow him to say no. I'm not going to force him. I'm not going to pressure him. Went across the street. There's a Mexican restaurant that was serving breakfast. I got breakfast for a bunch of guys, and I brought it over, and I ring it again. He opens the door, and I had breakfast for him. And eventually they let me in, and we chatted, and I eventually photographed the president, the head of that chapter, Cisco Valderrama and Flash, and this guy's name was Marvin. And it was a great portrait. I'm proud of it. It was like I made that happen because of my ability to just go up to anybody, killers, anybody, and just walk up to them and say, hey, this is what I like to do.